Welcome to the Classroom Narratives Healing and Education podcast, the space where education meets resilience. I'm Dr. Joey Weisler, and in each episode, we dive deep into the personal stories of educators, students, leaders, and frontline advocates who are navigating the complexities within modern education. Whether you're just starting your teaching journey or are a seasoned professional looking for inspiration, we'll explore how to foster meaningful change, prevent burnout, and build trauma-informed communities within our schools. Now, let's take a seat at the front of the classroom as we get started. Welcome back to the Classroom Narratives Podcast, the space where we help teachers identify and implement strategies that engage students with curriculum while upholding both academic rigor and emotional connection. I'm your host, Dr. Joey Weisler, and in this series of segments, I'm so excited to prepare for the launch of my first book. Woohoo! And my book is titled Teaching with Heart and Soul: Purposeful Practices for Teaching the Child Beyond the Brain. So throughout the summer and fall of 2026, for those tuning in real time, I'm going to be releasing some evergreen segments that share exclusive writer's insights, annotated commentary, and backstories to the process of bringing this work to life. And my hope is that each segment in this bundle will further equip you for the work that you're doing in our classrooms every day. And I know that the latest buzzwords in education are to build relationships and focus on self-care. The intention is there, I know it really is, but while we're directed to do these things, we're never really taught how to do them. And that's why career fatigue has become unsustainable for those still in the profession. So in my first year of teaching, I went back to my kindergarten teacher, and she told me a secret, and I want to share it with you throughout this entire thread of episodes in this Heart series here. Whether you're teaching elementary school or college classes, science or humanities subjects, the secret that was given to me will transform the heart of your work, and it saved my ability to continue in my dream job of teaching. Are you still with me? Good. Now step into our classroom community and get yourself settled. It's time to talk about teaching the child to the heart beyond the brain. Welcome to our first solo segment, everyone, here about the Heart Framework. I am so excited that you're tuning in, and it means so much to me that you are following along on this journey through the heart. So I have a confession to make up front. This is actually the second time I am doing this entire intro segment fully from scratch. The first time I did this segment, it was pretty familiar with the content that I had, but then some things had changed in the weeks afterwards. The biggest change was that I had an opportunity to sit down for my podcast with Dr. Rondalyn Whitney, all about narrative medicine. And Dr. Whitney really spoke about being a witness to the work that you produce or the writing that you make and the content that you put out there. And so I went away with Dr. Whitney's words and I started revisiting some of my own works as well, especially one of them being my own biopic screenplay called The Throne in the Classroom. And what I did when I was working with my own biopic is that I decided to go into some old archives, or rather some old journals that I was writing back at the age of 18, my senior year of high school. And I wanted to revisit those journals just to see how I had anticipated the profession of teaching during my own high school years. And I don't believe that my intent to go back into those archives, which I had not touched in almost a decade, was really to find any answers, but I was certainly wanting to use what I gathered to help shape the perspective that I needed to actually go back and write the story that I was focusing on currently. So, what did I realize when I dusted off these 13-year-old archives from age 18? What I realized is that when it came to how I thought about teaching at that time, I was very optimistic, but I was a lot less naive than I thought. I was very hopeful, but I also carried this anticipated sense that I would need to forgive the system at some point for however it was going to work towards me. For a significant amount of time, however, that forgiveness that I anticipated was replaced with resentment as I felt myself begin teaching with a sense of innocence that morphed very quickly into discontentment. And as a teenager, I was empathetic, but I also recognized my errors when it came to overstepping with, for example, peer mental health. The first version of the segment that I had recorded and edited was really a total recap of what my teaching journey was like, and when I felt myself being heartless, and how all I wanted in my first year was another educator who could approach me without mocking my vision of seeing good in the system, and yet still say to me, yes, it is this messy. But here's the thing, that's entirely redundant content from not only a recent segment, but recent segments plural, all throughout the thread of this entire podcast series. And in the spirit of evergreen material, I'm going to link at least one of those segments here in the show notes that explicitly talks about that part of my journey for you to check out on your own. And throughout this re-recording, you'll get some recaps for those tuning in for the first time as to what that story is all about, but to spare the redundancies of it for those who have been following this work for a minute, I'm going to give you some news stories that I've never really told before. What this segment does is take a piece of my childhood that I almost never share aloud, and that's not because I'm dissatisfied with it, but it's because I've really tried to tuck it away for many years. After continuing to dwell on it, had started to feel both perpetrating and unhelpful. So I've spoken very openly about the day that I was dismissed from my probationary contract across several segments of my own, even as a guest on other people's shows, and even in the presence of the very students I had taught during that time, years later, of course. However, the anecdotes from this episode are ones I typically keep private, most out of respect to my friend, who I will be sharing about in the segment, who was a very private person. But I would like to take the space to tell our story together between me and my friend. And as a disclaimer, I will be telling the story through how I personally witnessed it in order to preserve and respect the legacy of my friend and the perspectives that we have. So I want to start the take two of the segment by talking about the look. And this is important to me because it roots back to my time as a student. In my senior year of high school, I met a sophomore whom I shall call Andrew in this segment as a pseudonym, who I noticed carried the look. Not the look that says, I need help or fix me, just the look that said, stop and see me. Just make me feel visible and take me for who I am. I instantly connected with Andrew's look when I met him because it was the same look that I had carried around for all of middle school and even through freshman, sophomore, and junior year of high school. And now I really did have some lovely humans as part of my life in those 3 years of high school, and I'm still connected to one of them today. But those friends had other great circles of friends and clubs where I was lacking. The thing is that I didn't want to get involved. I thought that school was an institution of learning, and to be a part of its culture, to grow socially, felt really asinine to me. Much like how some adults feel like their job is to show up to work, do the job assigned to perform, keep their head down and go home, and avoid interacting with colleagues. And the difference with Andrew was that, not in a way that was manipulative on my end, but I knew that because, like me, walking around with quote unquote the look read as make me feel visible, likely in the absence of other outlets, other circles, other clubs in school that would be vying for his attention. So I suppose on my end that felt advantageous is the word that I would use when befriending him because I knew that we would have each other's full undivided attention in our friendship. And I want to talk about our friendship because it was a very unique one. I mean, sure, we had some inside jokes, especially about our shared classes. We had mutual mentors, which is one of the ways that we were able to meet in one of our classes. And I still carry strong connections with those very same teachers today. And one of those teachers that Andrew felt very close to was my own freshman mentor, who is a teacher that I had had when, if you think about the timeline, when Andrew was in seventh grade. So these are educators that by the time I had met Andrew in my senior year were very near and very dear to me as well. And this is not a friendship talking about sports or rock bands or I don't even know what teenage boys talk about nowadays. I really don't. But the fact was that our friendship was actually sustained on silence, on presence, on peacefulness, and not feeling like we needed to uphold these high school personas and perform for other people. We didn't need words all the time to just be in each other's company. But check it out. Two high school teens, and one lunch conversation that I distinctly remember very fondly also was when I was reading a book by Dr. Brian Weiss called Many Lives, Many Masters. And the book, Be What It was about past life regression and the traveling of the soul. And to give an example as to what some of our conversations did look like when we were actually sharing dialogue during meals, was trying to speculate after my book reading if maybe our souls had known each other through several lifetimes and what such past encounters could have looked like. So, if there was to be a threshold for what I coined to be a typical lunch conversation, it was certainly more like that. Okay. And so many of my own teachers were very careful in how they directed me towards teaching, most in part because they knew before I did that my empathy would have the potential to unravel me. And I appreciate my mentors for that, even though I don't mention that enough during these segments. But when my mentors spoke to me about teaching, I started to learn that they weren't cynical. They were actually more practical, and they were even scared for me in ways that said, please don't let the system disillusion you too. And when I would ask Andrew if he felt I could be an effective educator, he would simply smile with grace. And one time he said to me, you have the willpower to do anything. And I literally wrote those words and quoted them on my clipboard in my first year of teaching. And whenever I did start to feel disillusioned, I would hold my clipboard literally right up to my heart, mustering for the belief that somebody had in me. And when I think about our friendship, that's what I remember. The person who believed in me innocently, even in dark moments where I felt myself unraveling in this profession. I recently spoke on a podcast with a middle school principal. His name is Shaun Hurtado from California, and I'm going to pause here and play a soundbite from our recording so you can hear the method directly from him before it gets released on the full podcast later on this year as well. Check it out.
One of the things, an exercise that I do on my campus is we say, find the no dot students. And so once or twice a year, we'll put up all the face sheets of all the kids in the school. So just their name and picture, and that's it. And so we'll hang those up and we'll say, okay, if you know something personal about this student, any student that's on the board, go put a sticker, a little sticker dot on it, right? And so we have all the teachers get up and they're going around and putting a sticker. And I say, hey, it's not just that this kid was in your class last semester. It's not that you just know their first name. You know something personal about them, their favorite sport, their favorite football team, you know something about their family. It has to be like a personal fact that you know about this person. And so they'll go around and they'll do this. We'll give people about 20, 30 minutes to put stickers up. And then you look at the kids and you're going to get a ton of data on who's fallen through your cracks by looking at the number of dots that are on their face sheet. So you're going to have kids that have 15, 20, 30 dots on their face sheet because everybody knows who that kid is, right? That kid's going to be okay. You don't stop worrying about him. You still keep an eye on him. But there's 15 people that said, I have a connection with that kid on my campus. He's going to be okay, right? You look for the no dot kids. Who are the kids that nobody of all the staff members that went through that exercise was not able to put a sticker on that kid's face sheet? Or if you have a one or a two dot kid, that means there's maybe one or two adults that know something about that kid. Who needs more support? Who needs more help? The 15 dot kid or the no dot kid?
So, as far as my high school experience, even though I carried around, quote unquote, the look, I was surrounded by adults that assured me, you are seen, and you have reason to feel safe here. And again, I want to be careful by what I'm about to say because I'm describing my own experience, right? Based upon what I saw and what I witnessed. But I would testify that I'm not certain, nor am I sure, that Andrew had similar connections like that. And ironically enough, part of our friendship was through the common allies that we had of our favorite teachers again. But from what I remember and from what I witnessed about Andrew during our time in school, is that he was alone. But again, that's my perspective as a friend who only occupied a very small part of his life. Now, there may have been connections, there may have been conversations and relationships that existed entirely outside my view, especially as he progressed through high school after I had graduated. But that is one of my key observations. And this is not like when I would speak about him to our common teachers, they would say, who is that? But they would say, oh, of course, yeah, I know Andrew. But what this does mean is that I never personally witnessed Andrew going out of his way to connect with teachers. And I mention that because part of my justification here is that students have the right to hold that boundary for themselves. And part of the work that these segments will talk about throughout the HEART method is that students have the right to maintain any boundary that they want. And as often as we have teachers that come into the profession and say, I'm here to teach, and just like I thought as a student when I come into school, I'm here to learn, many students feel that their teacher is the conduit of knowledge and should have no privy to their personal life. That's reasonable and that's valid and should be respected as long as the student's personal life does not prove to be a threat to themselves, their ability to learn, and also contributes to maintaining a regulated whole group classroom space. So, why am I re recording an entire segment on my friend Andrew and the look? Because on the very day I record the segment, Andrew should be 29. His 29th birthday was 2 days ago. However, his life ended weeks before his 21st birthday by suicide. And when I received the devastating news of his passing from his twin sister, I spent days on my couch catatonically going through journals as Eliza quotes in Hamilton, searching and scanning for answers of some kind of sign of what I may have missed, of what I may have witnessed and could have possibly done to save his life. And my lack of answers from my own journals, which were emotionally charged around asking that question, how can we save people who do not ask to be saved, even back in 2013, was very, very prevalent to me during my teenage years. And reading those entries after his passing did not make me feel peace. Instead, it left a hollow hole for years, followed by confusion, anger, and even shame. But this work is far removed from Andrew's death. In fact, what Hart is entirely rooted in is how he lived and how I engaged with him during life before taking those lessons forward into my career. As a kid and as a student, I genuinely believed if I noticed someone is hurting, I should do something. And every major conflict as a student and as an educator is a result of what happened when that belief collided with my own reality. I was the kid who sat down next to Andrew at a vending machine because I recognized the look that he carried. And then I spent the next decade trying to figure out what responsibility comes from recognizing that look. That was why I went into teaching, to look for the students who carried the look. So, what did I learn from going into my archives more recently? I learned that as much as I have spent 18 months worth of podcast segments throwing blame since I began this project in August 2024, actually closer to 2 years now that I think about it, it was not the system that unraveled me. And I will admit that guiltlessly here. The system didn't unravel me. The system simply reacted to me, leaning into the traits that I felt made me extraordinary as an educator, which was to look for the look and acknowledge it when it shows up on the faces of others. This past weekend was the first time since Andrew's immediate death over 8 years ago that I revisited those writings because I was afraid that the response I would draw would be less conclusive than that if I had done that endeavor any sooner. What made my friendship with Andrew stand out? Andrew was the first person who let me really see someone else with the look and recognize that I too had that same demeanor. And I didn't realize how alone I deliberately chose to be before meeting Andrew, how much of a separatist I was. And I didn't realize why my mentor would tell me in senior year, I know there will come a day, but you will be doing so well that I won't have to worry about you anymore. And of course, I was surprised by this comment when I heard it for the first time because I thought I was doing fantastic as a senior about to get ready for college, and I didn't see myself as somebody who was carrying the weight of concern. But the version of me 13 years advanced realizes, without a shadow of a doubt, that my mentor was thinking at the time, Joey is going to have his heart irreversibly broken if he actually does go into teaching because of the persona that he carries. And I know now, being a teacher, how much my teachers loved me because they were vulnerable enough to admit their worry for me. And because once I realized that I too carried the look, I wanted to literally just pull it out of Andrew, and I didn't understand that recognizing did not mean that I had to intervene and carry and even solve. And I didn't understand the difference as a high school senior between caring for people and carrying for people, where the former sustains us and the latter breaks us. And my mentor absolutely knew that. Because after Andrew, the trope proceeded with realistic continuity. Andrew. Joey sees loneliness. Joey sees himself. Joey tries to save Andrew. A student in my first year of teaching who was in the wrong class because of testing placement. Joey sees himself. Joey tries to save him. Another student from a different class who was clearly abandoned by the system. Joey sees himself. Joey tries to save the student. Even the system entirely, the school that I worked for. Joey sees a broken institution, and he tries to repair what once broke him within it. And even as a first year seminar educator now, at the college level, for transitioning freshmen every fall, Joey sees students broken by transitions. He thinks about the transition into college that once gave him agony. He tries to save it. The pattern? Every time I intervene, I assure myself that that will be the time that I finally get it right. Why? Because I was always worried about the stakes if I didn't get it right. And that's the reality. I've actually never gotten it right. My scoreboard is clearly zero. And while I lived with the worst case scenarios, both personally and professionally, by losing Andrew personally and being asked to resign in my first year of teaching because it became too visible with how much I was trying to carry. I understand now that the opposite of intervention is not full isolation from someone's situation. I mean, if you think about it, when a patient is sick, the doctor doesn't say, "Oh, sorry, can't see you, don't come to my office," but instead, a doctor will enter an exam room with personal protective equipment and engage carefully in a way that allows them to come to an informed conclusion with how to best support a patient. Teachers are capable of supporting students in very like minded ways. I really do find it admirable when people enter a certain line of work with motivation to repair something they did not experience to the benefit of others. One of my favorite college professors with the biggest heart once told me after that I had graduated, they said, "If cyberbullying was a thing when I was an adolescent, I'm unsure if I would be in front of you having this conversation right now." The trope of an empath entering a field of work for the intent of systemic improvement is remarkable, especially when in education, for example. The empaths are the ones who our students remember for enabling them to be seen and heard. But the boundary gets really blurry when empathy becomes an unsolicited invasion, and what the heart and soul framework asks in this process and throughout these next several chain of segments is what happens when care turns into carry and compassion morphs into find a resolution or else. And I acknowledge with both confidence and gratitude that Andrew was the origin of really helping me ponder those questions before they became drastically complicated by both professional and career level stakes. Let's pause here for a moment because I want to know why you are here, why you are tuning in today, and why you've listened to me talk for the past several minutes here. And this is not a reconnect with your why sort of question. This is a genuine curiosity that holds only valid answers, no matter which way you feel. I'm guessing you chose to dedicate your life to the classroom because you are a problem solver to some degree. But when you intended to go into the classroom, did you enter feeling like you could solve a problem that someone else was dealing with, or a problem that you were dealing with? And again, both are valid. And I ask this question knowing that both exist, even sometimes in tandem. And I think I thought I went into the field to solve the problems of others, but each time I attempted, I realized I was actually, in fact, very much so, trying to fix myself. And it's not to say it was selfish, but it does hint that I was consistently wrestling with what I needed in order to carry out the best performance for the work I had chosen to do as a professional. And that realization is ultimately what led me to the heart. The heart framework is more than a mindset or even a strategy. It is actually a barrier and a safety net that's offering educators the ability to care without the need to carry. Now, if a student came to me tomorrow with tears in their eyes and said, "I'm feeling suicidal, help me," even after I had stayed with that student until the next professional in the building attended to their wellness and even performed a threat assessment and determined the student's safety, I am 99.999% sure that I would still go home and dwell on that. when I went home that night, and even the next week, maybe even the next month, maybe even for the rest of that term or the school year. The heart mindset will not exonerate you from saying, I did my job and that's it. But it will safely embody the idea of I am doing my best to keep my students safe and sustain my boundaries so I can continue performing highly for them. We gotta have this symbiotic relationship there. When Columbine had happened, surviving English teacher Paula Reed states that she just wanted one thing, and that was to speak to somebody who has quote unquote been through it. And Paula has since been a conduit by doing the same, speaking to many survivors across many different tragedies. And like Paula, in my first year of teaching, I just wanted to talk to somebody who had been through it and tell me that it would be okay, much like how my former Spanish teacher did for me in my first year of teaching middle school, when for a brief time I was her next door teacher neighbor. She never mocked me, and she never told me that I could never get it done, like many other adults on that campus did, but instead she just looked at me and said all the time, yes, it is this hard, and it's going to be messy, but you are going to work through it. Thank you, Professora, for always believing in me as your student and as your colleague. And so now I too am working to be that conduit through this work. And I'm offering no promise that the profession will become easier by being a part of this work with me. But what I can offer is that by using the resources throughout these podcast segments and in the book that's going to be published, the vision of things getting better can become more possible than ever before. So, what's the secret that I alluded to here in the segment's introduction? I went back to my kindergarten teacher in my first year, and I said to her, you made this look so much fun. What am I doing wrong? And she said to me, when you came into class, I would say to myself, this is going to be so much fun, and I'm going to have the best day. And the way I did that was by teaching to the whole child. I went beyond the brain, she said, and I went to teach to the heart. Those were her words. And the way I thought about it since, I thought to myself, what is the heart? It is the mindset that can both handle and balance the presence of emotions in academic spaces while keeping the classroom teacher facilitator in alignment and within boundaries. How can it be done? Stick around to find out. Thank you for joining us on the Classroom Narratives Healing and Education podcast. If today's episode inspired you or made you think differently, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment or review wherever you listen to podcasts and stay connected with us on the @Classroom Narratives podcast over Instagram and Facebook. Remember, together we can transform our scars into stars in education, one conversation at a time.